Hello, lovely people. It's Easter, and I have an Easter message which has to do with what has become our tradition for Easter, which is to stuff our faces with loads of chocolate. So here we all are, confined to our houses, pacing up and down like caged beasts, wondering what to do to fill our time and to stop us from tearing each other limb from limb in our frustration. Well, a lot of people are finding things that they can do. And I want to add one thing to those, and that is, start thinking more about your own health and taking care of your health. So there's one single health factor that is actually in our control, and yet most of us don't realise. And most of us are in the position of being poisoned on a daily basis by this substance which is everywhere in our food, and we don't pay any attention. And if we did, if we could somehow change our mindset towards this poison, we could improve our health so much. We would increase our chances of surviving any kind of infection. Obviously we're all going to die eventually anyway. Life, as they say, is fatal. But we would improve the quality of our lives and probably the length of our lives, and that's going to improve everything for everybody. So I want to tell you about this poison, this toxin that is everywhere in our diets and ruining our bodies. What this poison is doing is secretly eroding our immune system and opening us up to inflammations and infections and long-term ailments, all without us knowing. And the reason why we don't realise is partly because of government misinformation and partly because of big industry. This toxin I'm talking about is something which has been around for the last few centuries. Well, it's been around for a long, long time. But it's only in, I don't know, since the last World War, really, that it's become more of an issue. And it exists in nature, and in nature, it really isn't toxic. It's only when we extract it and feed it to ourselves that it becomes an issue. So, have you guessed what I'm talking about yet? I'm sure it can't be that hard to guess. It's sugar. Most people really don't understand what sugar is doing to them. It really is the worst toxin of modern society. And I'll tell you why. I'm not a scientist, but I have been reading a lot of science lately, and you can check it out for yourself. There has been a whole food movement for a very long time, but it's always remained a minority. And nowadays there are so many other faddish approaches to diet that it's hard to sort out what is good and what is nonsense, basically. The thing about obesity is, really, it's blaming the victim. This is a very easy thing to do. Oh, you're too fat, it's all your fault, you just ate too much. It's not as easy as that. And it's not your fault. It really, really, really isn't your fault. And it's not due to you eating too much, and it's not due to you having a loss of self-control, and it's not due to you having faulty hormones. In the vast, vast, vast majority of cases, it's due simply to the sugar industry pushing this stuff at us, and because it's addictive and because it's hidden and because everybody else is consuming it, we don't realise what's going on. We can take back control. We can say, no, no more sugar. I'm not going to do this to my system anymore. Do you realise, I didn't realise until I read about it recently, the amount of sugar you need in your blood to be healthy amounts to 1 to 1.5 teaspoons. That's right, just 1 to 1.5 teaspoons. That's less than what you get in 1 can of Coke, much less. So when you've got all this excess sugar swilling around in your blood, what it's doing is it attacks your system, it creates inflammation, it poisons you. It's horrible stuff. It's not something we evolved to deal with. And the only way we can deal with it is by producing masses of insulin, which then rushes around, gathering up all the spare sugar that we can't deal with and turning it into fat. That's what it does. So basically, we just need to stop eating sugar and a lot of our problems will be solved in one fell swoop. How about that? Well, I know it's not that simple, obviously. I am lucky, perhaps, not to have an addictive personality. I don't find that consuming something makes me want more and more, although I do notice if I have, say if I eat a biscuit, immediately afterwards I want another biscuit. So, there's the physiology which none of us can escape. So the solution I've adopted is whenever I go around the supermarket looking at the shelves, I basically brainwash myself. I say, that's poison, that's poison. Oh, yuck, that's so disgusting. That's full of sugar and synthetic oils and I can't possibly put those chemicals in my body. And I stand in front of the sugary goods counters and have this internal argument with myself. And in the end, I realise I don't really want to poison myself and I turn away and buy a vegetable or something. So you really have to work on it, and it's not instantaneous and it's not easy, but believe me, it's so much easier to lose weight if you realise that sugar is the problem and fat is not the problem. So the thesis is basically this. Sometime around the turn of the century before last, the end of the Victorian era, I guess, sometime around then, people were really getting into gear with refining goods and mass-producing goods. And everybody had access to a lot more sugar and white flour than before. And people started getting more heart disease and more diabetes and more cancer and dying off at a more rapid rate than they had been before. I know that people used to die a lot of infectious diseases before they invented vaccines and hygiene, but I'm talking about things like cancer and diabetes, basically. So people are dying more of these things. Some physicians in America thought they'd try and tackle the problem, and one in particular, Ancel Keys, who shall be infamous, really bullied the American food and drug people into accepting his idea, based on very faulty science, that what was causing the problem was fat. People were eating animal fat and it was destroying their arteries. So then we started on a long crusade and a path in the wrong direction, telling people they shouldn't eat animal fat. So people stopped eating fat altogether and they started getting very hungry because you need fat. Your system needs fat and you need fat to feel full. And if you don't eat fat, you're constantly hungry. So they'd eat more and more sugar. And guess what? The rate of heart disease and diabetes went up. It didn't go down because Ancel Keys, bless him, was wrong. And the problem was not saturated fat. It was not animal fat. And we were compounding the problem by filling ourselves with synthetic alternatives, refined so-called vegetable oils that need, I am informed, up to 7 different chemical processes in order to extract them, purify them and make them edible, as opposed to things like beef dripping, which you just warm up the beef and the dripping comes out of it. Anyway, so we went along this long path of deluding ourselves about what was good for us, feeding ourselves the wrong things and getting sicker and sicker. So I reckon it's time to reverse this trend. Educate yourselves. Read about it, watch videos. I particularly recommend somebody called Nina Teicholz, who spent 10 years looking through the science for some way, some kind of evidence for the sort of general teachings about fat, and she couldn't find it. And she wrote a book called The Big Fat Surprise, which really sets it out very clearly, the whole thing. So what we've got to do is we've got to think about how it is that we got to the point where we eat so much sugar and how we accept it, and what does it really do to our bodies? How does it make our bodies feel? I'd like to advocate trying an experiment. Go for a day without sugar. See what your reaction is. If you find you are craving sugar and wanting to go out and sneak another candy bar or something, and it's really, really upsetting you not having sugar for a day, well, just ask yourself, what's going on in my body? Why have I got this dreadful craving? And is it good for me? And maybe that will help you to stiffen your resolve to get out of this stranglehold that the sugar industry has over us, to do your own personal bit for improving the health of the nation. If you look at the ingredients lists on packets of ready-made food, you will always find sugar there, quite high up the list. And the same with canned drinks, unless they have sweeteners, and sweeteners is a whole other issue. Why would you want to poison your body with chemicals instead of another chemical that is also poisonous? Why wouldn't you just want to get rid of the whole lot out of your system? Is there any point in spending your life drinking health drinks, sports drinks, etc., and then going on a detox diet because you're toxic? I mean, your body knows how to detoxify itself without you doing anything, as long as you're not continually adding to the toxins, and sugar is that toxin, believe me. So my message to you is, be safe and don't eat sugar. Bye.